Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're plunging into something really core to making your English sound, well, more natural, more confident, more you.
Yeah, we're talking about asking better questions.
Exactly. It's, the power hidden in how you ask things.
It really is.
Mhm.
It's something I think a lot of learners maybe focus on later, but it shapes every single conversation you have. We spend so much time learning to answer.
Right.
We kind of forget that asking is just as vital, especially for connection.
Totally. And we've been digging into some really interesting source material on this, how, just tweaking the questions you ask can genuinely transform your English interactions.
Hmm.
So our mission really for this deep dive is to help you unlock that potential, to move past the sort of basic stuff into conversations that really well engage.
Think about it like this, maybe. Asking a good, thoughtful question isn't just about getting info. It's like having a key.
A key, I like that.
Yeah, the right question, it unlocks deeper understanding. It builds that connection, that rapport, and just makes your English feel so much more fluid, more authentic.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Where does this journey usually begin? Often it's with the questions we do ask, right?
Yeah.
And maybe where we get a bit stuck.
One of the main things highlighted in the material is how easy it is for English learners to just rely, maybe too heavily, on a few simple question forms.
Mhm.
We get comfortable with things like, can I have?
Yeah.
Or do you like?
Yeah.
Or even, what is your Mbisa?
Yeah.
Those kinds of formulas.
And look, grammatically speaking, there's nothing actually wrong with can I go there? Or what is your name?
Right.
Or, do you like pizza? They work. People will understand you.
They will. They will. But as the sources point out, while they're functional, they can sometimes sound a bit stiff,
Yeah.
maybe even a little robotic in a real conversation.
Yeah, I can see that.
Real, engaging chats use questions that have a bit more nuance, don't they? More life. They invite more than just a quick yes or no or like a one-word answer.
So the goal isn't just being correct. It's about sounding authentic. Like you're actually in the conversation, not just, doing a grammar drill.
Exactly.
It's about asking things that make someone maybe pause for a second and think, oh, okay, that's an interesting question.
And often, sounding a bit basic just comes from falling into these common question habits.
Yeah.
We saw a few pitfalls pointed out in the material we looked at.
Yes, the material calls them common mistakes, and it's pretty easy to see why. A big one is just overusing can I or do you.
Right.
The example given was, can I have water? Sure, it works, gets you water, but compare it to, say, could I get a glass of water, please? How does that sound?
Much softer, right? Way more polite, wouldn't you say? That tiny little shift from can to could. It's simple, but it's really powerful softener.
Definitely.
Another habit is always defaulting to those what is your questions.
Like, what is your favorite food? Okay, it gets the job done. But the suggested upgrade was brilliant, I thought.
Which one was that?
If you could eat only one dish for a week, what would it be?
Ah, yes. Now, that question, it doesn't just ask for a piece of information, does it? It sparks imagination.
Totally.
It invites a story, maybe a reason why, a more involved answer. It's instantly more memorable.
For sure.
And the third mistake mentioned was asking questions without any real intonation or personal touch, making them sound flat, almost interrogative.
Yeah, like just asking, do you like movies? Flat. Versus something like, so what's the last movie that really made you cry? Or laugh out loud?
Big difference.
The second one shows actual curiosity about their emotional response, not just a general preference check. So it's not just the structure, it's the feeling behind it, the invitation the question offers.
So how do we actually make these upgrades concrete? Let's maybe look at some direct comparisons that were in the source material. Moving from those foundational questions to forms that feel way more natural and engaging.
Okay, yeah, let's dive into some specifics. So instead of the really direct, can I sit here, what's a better option?
Well, you could try, is this seat taken? That's pretty standard, polite. Or maybe even more casual, mind if I join you?
Oh, I like that last one. Mind if I join you? That feels very conversational, very friendly, doesn't it?
It does. It uses a totally different structure. That's just really common in natural spoken English.
Okay, or how about instead of the simple yes, no, do you like music?
Yeah, you could open the door a bit wider, couldn't you? Ask about their personal experience, like what kind of music helps you relax? Or maybe, is there a song that really reminds you of your childhood?
Ah, see how those immediately shift it from just a generic topic to something personal, a connection.
Totally. And the slightly blunt, what is your job? We saw a great alternative suggested for that, too.
Right, like, So what do you spend most of your time doing? Or maybe what aspect of your work do you enjoy the most?
Exactly. Those feel less like an interview, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
and more like you're genuinely interested in their actual day-to-day life and what fulfills them.
Mm-hmm.
Similarly, just asking where are you from can feel a bit basic.
Yeah, a bit abrupt sometimes. How about trying, where's home for you? Or even, did you grow up more in the city or out in the countryside?
Nice. Those invite them to share a little bit more, don't they?
Yeah.
About their background, maybe a little story about their hometown, potentially.
Yeah.
And finally, instead of just the bare, can you help me? Adding that layer of politeness makes such a difference.
How so?
Things like, could I ask for your help for just a second? Or, would you mind helping me with this? They just sound far more courteous, much less demanding.
They really do.
And these are exactly the kinds of upgrades that signal more than just fluency. They signal confidence, curiosity, being approachable.
What's really insightful, I think, is that there seems to be a kind of underlying structure or philosophy to these better questions. The material broke it down into 3 core elements.
Yes, that was really helpful. They called out politeness, curiosity, and adding a personal touch.
Right. Politeness first, that's about sort of smoothing the edges. Using phrases like, could you? Or, would you mind? Maybe, do you happen to know? They signal respect, make your question feel less abrupt.
And curiosity, that means genuinely wanting to know more. And structuring your question so it reflects that usually means steering clear of simple yes-no questions
Uh-huh.
and using things like what, how, why, or tell me about, things that encourage a more detailed answer and keep the conversation actually flowing.
And the personal touch is vital. It's about tailoring the question just slightly to the person or the situation. It shows you're not just reciting a memorized
But it
phrase.
just feel human,
Yeah,
specific.
exactly.
The material offered a really simple but kind of perfect illustration of this. Instead of just asking, do you live here?
Right, which is just a quick info check.
Try asking, have you lived in the city for long?
I see. Okay. Do you live here is just data. But have you lived in this city for long? Adds that politeness. Have you? And it invites a story about their experience, their history in that place.
Exactly. It instantly makes the question about them and their journey, not just a fact.
You can really see these elements coming together in practice. The material gave that little hypothetical conversation snippet.
Right. With Anna and Mark, let's picture it. 2 people. They've just met. Anna could just say, what's your name? Mark replies, fine. They're very, very functional.
Okay.
But if Anna uses these principles, maybe after introductions, instead of a basic question, she asks something like, so what brings you here tonight?
Oh, much better than just, why are you here? That
Right.
could sound a bit accusatory almost.
Right.
What brings you here is polite, it's curious.
Exactly. Then maybe Mark mentions he enjoys live music.
Hmm.
Anna doesn't just say, oh, do you like music?
No.
Instead, she might ask, oh, nice. What kind of music really helps you unwind after a busy day?
Okay, I see how that second question really works. It builds on what he just said, the live music thing. It shows curiosity, what kind,
Hmm.
and it adds that personal, relatable context after a busy day.
Precisely. It's not just about music in general. It's about his relationship with music in his life. That's the real power of these upgrades.
Okay, this is where it gets really practical. Let's try putting this into practice ourselves, just like the source material suggests we should encourage you to do. Think about how you might upgrade some common, basic questions using politeness, curiosity, and that personal touch.
Yeah, let's throw out some basic ones. How can we make these more engaging? First one, can I help you?
Okay. How about, do you like food? Bit basic.
What's your name?
Standard, but maybe a bit abrupt. Do you speak English?
Oh, it feels a bit awkward, that one. And can we meet tomorrow?
Okay, right. Now let's look at some of the upgraded versions we saw. For can I help you? The suggestion was, is there anything I can help you with that feels more open, somehow less direct?
Yeah, definitely more inviting. For do you like food? Instead of that, how about what's your go-to comfort food? That's immediately asking for something specific and personal.
Love that one. Comfort food. Okay, for what's your name? Oh, instead of that slightly, interrogation vibe. A great polite option is, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
It's kind of clever.
Yeah.
It sort of assumes they might have already told you and frames it as your oversight, not their obligation. Very smooth.
Yeah. And for the tricky, do you speak English? Try. How long have you been learning English?
Ah, that assumes they do speak it. at least a bit, and invites a story about their language journey. Much
Hmm.
less confrontational.
Totally avoids the potential no and awkward silence. And finally, for can we meet tomorrow, which is just a direct yes-no request.
Yeah.
Make it more flexible and polite with, would tomorrow work for you to meet?
Yeah, offers them more control.
Wow. Okay, putting those side by side really does highlight the difference, doesn't it? They feel completely different to say, and I imagine totally different to receive.
Absolutely. Great job if you were kind of practicing those upgrades in your head as we went along.
So how do you actually start doing this more consistently? It's one thing to know it.
Right. The material offered some really practical tips that go beyond just, knowing the theory.
Okay, what's first?
First, and maybe most important, listen actively. Pay close attention to how fluent speakers, native or not, actually phrase their questions in real life.
Like in movies, podcasts, interviews.
Exactly. What kinds of words, what structures do they use to get information or just keep things flowing smoothly? You start to notice patterns.
Good tip. What else?
Second, practice with someone,
Mm.
a friend, maybe a language partner. You could even make a sort of low-stakes game out of it. Take basic questions and try to upgrade them together. Brainstorm different ways to ask the same thing.
Makes it less intimidating. Third,
Embrace variety. Don't just find one upgraded version for, say, do you like X, and then use it every single time.
good point. Could sound robotic again.
Right. Learn multiple ways to ask similar things. That way you have options and you sound more spontaneous, more natural.
And fourth, this was a slightly unique one, but I thought powerful. Write daily questions in a journal.
How does that work?
Challenge yourself to formulate, say, 5 different ways to ask about someone's day, or their weekend plans, or what they thought about, I don't know, a recent event. It forces you to get creative and really builds that question-asking muscle memory.
That's interesting. Kind of like exercise for your conversation skills.
Exactly. So pulling all this together, what's the big takeaway from this deep dive? It feels simple, maybe, but actually quite profound.
Yeah, I think it boils down to this. The quality of your questions directly impacts the quality of your conversations. It's that direct.
Absolutely. If you make a conscious effort, to ask better, more thoughtful questions.
You'll naturally engage more deeply. You'll listen more carefully because you want the answer, and you'll actually speak more fluently. Why? Because you're building real connections, not just swapping facts.
Yeah. And moving past those sort of ingrained automatic questions like, can I, or do you like? It's not just about sounding fancy or complex. It's a really fundamental step towards sounding genuinely natural and confident in English.
Definitely. So just to recap, we've covered why asking better questions is so important, some common pitfalls to watch out for, specific examples of how to upgrade your questions.
We looked at those core elements: politeness, curiosity, the personal touch.
And finish with some practical ways to actually build this skill into your daily practice.
Right. So here is your challenge. Based on everything we've explored today, think of one basic question you find yourself using pretty frequently. Just one.
Mm-hmm.
This week, challenge yourself to upgrade it. Use those principles. Politeness, curiosity, adding a personal touch. How can you make that question more inviting, more engaging, more you?
That's a great challenge. And as you practice that, and as you start listening more closely to conversations around you, maybe consider this final thought.
Go on.
Reflect on some conversations you've had in the past. How might they have gone differently if a different, maybe a better question had been asked right at the start, or even halfway through?
Interesting.
How deeply do the questions you choose to ask really influence the depth of the connections you manage to make?
Something to really think about. Keep asking, keep learning, and keep making those connections. Until our next deep dive,